Hi, everybody. Welcome to podcast number 10, which is all about choosing a buffer system. Well, let's look at choosing a buffer system. So, again, we're going to go back to our Henderson-Hasselbalch equation. However, I'm not going to use it to calculate any pHs of buffers. It is something that we can look at so that we can see mathematically how this plays out. It says that the pH of a buffer depends on two factors. And we can see that here, that it depends on the pKa, right, or the Ka then, and it also depends on this ratio of the base and the acid, or acid and base. Okay, so what we're going to do is that notice that mostly it is based upon the pH is related to the pKa. And then we can do small adjustments by changing the ratios of the acids and bases out there. Okay, because if we think about it, right, when we have a buffer, we're going to want our buffer to be as close to a 1-to-1 ratio as possible. Okay, and so really kind of going outside of that as much as we can. If I thought about it, if I have the log of the base divided by the acid, let's just focus on that part of the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation. Okay, let us say that this was a relatively wide gap where the log was, say, about 1. So let's say that the base concentration was 1 for every 10 acids. Then the log of that would be -1. If, say, I had about 10 bases for every 1 acid, the log of this is 1. These are pretty much the extremes. Okay, so what this is telling us is that that factor can, adjust the pH by plus or minus about 1. But the majority of our changes are going to come from that pK. That's going to be the largest influencer when we choose our buffer system. So when we choose a buffer system, what we're going to do is we're going to look at, right, the buffer system itself, which is the weak acid and its conjugate base sitting there, right? And what we want to do is we want to pick something with a pKa that is close to the desired pH. So the desired pH and the pKa should be similar. Okay, because the pKa, again, the pH is equal to the pKa plus the log of base over acid, right? That was our biggest influencer there, is that pKa. So we want to choose something that's pretty close. So if you want to run an experiment and you want it to be run around a pH of 9, right? Well, you want something that has a pKa that's closest to 9, 9.25. So you might choose the ammonium ion with the ammonia there. And if you wanted it right at 9, then you could change, right, these factors in order to lower it a little bit. And the way that we would lower that down a little bit would be by changing that base to acid ratio, right? We would add in a little bit more acid, right, because we'd want to lower that pH. All right, so that's how we're going to pick our buffer systems. All right, next up, we are going to look at what happens, right, as we start to make buffers by partial neutralization and then how that then is affected by adding a strong acid or strong base to an existing buffer.